When Lu Yongxian saw Zhou Wen grip his hilt, he believed that Zhou Wen had discovered an enemy. He hurriedly circulated his primordial energy art and looked around warily. Zhao Xin and company tensed up as well. Although Zhou Wen and Lu Yongxian entered on their own accord, absolving them of any fault if they ended up dying, no one was willing to see their own kind beheaded in such a strange place. Suddenly, Zhou Wen's figure vanished as he appeared in front of a broken stone pillar like a ghost. With sabers tightly gripped with both hands, he slashed at the stone pillar in front of him as a sanguine arc beam slashed out. Crack. The stone pillar was split into two by Zhou Wen's saber. The cut was as smooth as a mirror, but blood spewed out from the cut. Lu Yongxian and the other three were stunned. Young Master Wen, is this the source of the strange spatial wind in the ruins? Lu Yongxian asked as he walked up to take a look at the realm wind insect's corpse. As Zhou Wen rummaged through the corpse of the realm wind insect, he nodded. That's right. There should be more than one. Don't go too far away from me, lest something happens. Unfortunately, the realm wind insect did not drop a crystal or a companion egg. While Zhou Wen led Lu Yongxian forward, Zhao Xin and company wore odd expressions outside. Brother Zhao, that punk, Zhou Wen, wasn't bullshitting. Even Adjutant and failed to find the dimensional creatures in the ruins. Yet, he managed to find them. It looks like he's really capable. Should we go in? One of them asked Zhao Xin. What are we going in for? To send ourselves to our deaths? If there's one, who knows how many of them there are? If they make a mistake, they'll still die in there. Since Adjutant and got us to stand guard here, we'll wait here for them. Why should we risk our lives? Zhao Xin said as he walked back. However, Zhou Wen kept surfacing in his mind. He couldn't help but mumble, that punk is a little odd. Zhou Wen didn't expect the location of the realm wind insects to be identical to the ones in the game. He didn't give the realm wind insects a chance to use realm wind, killing them within their stone crevices. Lu Yongxian followed Zhou Wen and watched as he charged forward as though he was a prescient god. The bamboo blade saw blood every time it was unsheathed. It killed the strange insects hidden in the rocks. The way he looked at Zhou Wen became odder. He had also seriously observed his surroundings, but he didn't notice anything abnormal. It was impossible for him to know where the realm wind insects were hidden. Yet, Zhou Wen struck with his saber with zero hesitation, decisively killing every realm wind insect. The ruin, that was originally enveloped in horror, seemed to become less terrifying because of the youth in front of him. In Lu Yongxian's eyes, Zhou Wen seemed to emit light and warmth, illuminating this land of terror. This feeling is so familiar. I've experienced it before. Lu Yongxian couldn't help but be reminded of the past when he charged into a dimensional zone within Tianzuo. At that time, Tianzuo was probably a little older than Zhou Wen. He was almost 20. Back then, Tianzuo had already been the head of the Yin family for several years and was known by everyone in Luong. They addressed him as young overseer. However, Tianzuo back then wasn't as accepted as he was now. Even the Yin family had many members against him. Once, a new dimensional zone appeared in Luong's south district, causing a large group of citizens to suffer a calamity. Tianzuo wanted to send men to suppress the dimensional zone in the south, but because of the clan's obstruction, only a small number of soldiers were sent. Tianzuo had no choice but to personally lead the troops into the dimensional zone. Back then, Lu Yongxian was not a battalion commander but a mere section commander. They had 4 sections that followed Tianzuo into the perilous dimensional zone where they encountered many bizarre dimensional creatures. The reinforcements that should have arrived didn't get there on time. Back then, many soldiers had already given up hope. They thought that they would definitely die in battle. Even Lu Yongxian had thought the same. However, it was that young man who held a revolver in one hand and a large sword in the other. He led them through the dimensional zone, storming a bloody path through the dimensional beast horde and led them out. At that time, Tianzuo was like the youth in front of him, emitting light and heat like the sun. After that battle, many of the surviving soldiers and low-ranking officers, like Lu Yongxian, later became the bedrock of the Sunset Army. They were also very loyal to Tianzuo. The first thing Tianzuo did when he returned to Luong was to rush to the residence of the Yin family's elder, Huishan, who had violated the military order. He then personally slew all the men who were above 16 years of age. That night, the Yin family's blood flowed like a river. The man who used to be like the sun had his military uniform covered in blood. He was like the devil that made it impossible for anyone to approach him. Only a handsome youth followed behind him, carrying a gunny sack on his back, walking to the martyrs' cemetery. They walked all the way, blood dripping from the gunny sack. When they arrived at the warrior's tomb in the dimensional zone, the handsome youth opened the cloth bag and bloody heads rolled out, stunning everyone. Huishan's family, from Huishan to his 16-year-old grandson and all the men who had been part of the military, were beheaded. All their heads were here, and they were hung in front of the mass grave to honor the deceased warriors. After that, Tianzuo took control of the Yin family's power one step at a time. The Sunset Army also gradually became synonymous with Tianzuo. It's been so many years. I've never seen anyone like him again. Lu Yongxian looked at Zhou Wen with mixed emotions. Perhaps due to the environment they had grown up in, this youth and Tianzuo had completely different personalities, but when they put their mind to doing something, they were surprisingly similar. It was as if they could do anything they wanted. They exuded a blinding radiance that was fatally attractive to others. Crack. Zhou Wen slashed open the stone pillar with his saber. A real wind insect had its body cleaved apart, causing a rhombic crystal to roll out. Zhou Wen was delighted when he saw the crystal. The crystal was transparent and flawless, and there seemed to be wind swirling within it. It was obvious that it was different from an ordinary crystal. Could this be a wind stat crystal? Zhou Wen hurriedly picked it up before secretly snapping it with his phone. Wind crystal 11. The information displayed on the phone delighted Zhou Wen as he secretly heaved a sigh of relief. If there were only 17 real wind insects in real life, with him already killing 13, he would have to give up on the real wind insect crystal in-game if the wind stat crystal didn't drop. Without any hesitation, he immediately absorbed the wind crystal. He felt a faint breeze enter his body, and his attributes had an additional wind element with a value of 11. Having reached the requirements needed to absorb the real wind insect crystal, Zhou Wen chose to absorb it. The crystal immediately turned into transparent wind that permeated the blood-colored avatar's body, forming a new primordial energy path and circulation in his body. Article 282 of 1597. Absorbed real wind insect crystal. Attained wind elemental primordial energy skill, boomerang wind. It's not real wind? Zhou Wen was somewhat disappointed. He had already seen how powerful it was, so he had been hoping that it would be real wind, but to his dismay, it wasn't. Scrutinizing the boomerang wind's information, he found that it was a passive wind elemental primordial energy skill that couldn't be used actively. It had to meet certain conditions before it could be used. Boomerang wind requires saber aura type primordial energy skill to trigger, creating a wind with a boomerang effect. Zhou Wen didn't know what the boomerang wind effect was, but thankfully, he knew a saber aura type primordial energy skill. It was the astral slash blade that he had obtained from the mutated demonized general. He had fused it with 2 other skills to form the demonic astral wheel. Now, Zhou Wen wasn't sure if it could still be considered a saber aura type primordial energy skill. Since I've learned it, I might as well give it a try. Zhou Wen continued walking forward until he reached a real wind insect's hiding spot. As he drew his saber, he used demonic astral wheel. A sanguine arc slashed out from the bamboo blade like a razor blade, slicing the stone pillar into 2 and killing the real wind insect inside. Zhou Wen sheathed his saber and was about to head over to check the corpse of the real wind insect to see if there were any crystals inside when he saw a sanguine beam flash. The astral slash blade he had slashed out had flown back, but thankfully, Zhou Wen reacted fast enough and ducked in time. Otherwise, he might have been hit by his own primordial energy skill. Crack. The demonic astral wheel slashed at the stone wall behind Zhou Wen, splitting the stone wall in half before it vanished. So this is the boomerang effect? That's quite interesting. Zhou Wen was slightly surprised. Typical primordial energy skills were uncontrollable once they were slashed out. But with boomerang wind, it gave him the possibility of controlling the demonic astral wheel he had slashed out. Young Master Wen, your saber aura is so strange. It's similar to the legendary cyclic saber aura, but it's also different. Cyclic saber aura achieves victory through artifice. The saber aura is elusive because of the curved trajectory it takes, but the destructive force is lacking. But for yours, it's extremely domineering while being bizarre. It really catches one off guard. If I hadn't seen it, I would never expect the saber aura to return. There's a high chance of me being heavily injured or even dying, Lu Yongxian said. I've only just learned it and haven't mastered it well. Sorry for making a fool of myself, Zhou Wen said. Then you have to practice properly. Such a technique is often very effective on the battlefield. Lu Yongxian said seriously, combat on the battlefield emphasizes a one-hit kill. Everyone will fight with all their might, but to have a slash suddenly appearing behind them is not something many will be able to dodge. Alright. Zhou Wen nodded. We'll talk about it later. It's more important to find In Sheng and the rest now. Zhou Wen was rather familiar with the interior of the ruins and had deliberately taken a detour to kill the real wind insects. Now that he had obtained the wind crystal, he stopped taking the detour and headed straight for the entrance to the passageway. Young Master Wen, could that be the underground entrance, Lu Chengzi? No. The Mei mentioned, Lu Yongxian said as he pointed at a dilapidated building. The structure was squarish like a stone box with only one empty side. From there, they could see a stone staircase leading underground. On both sides of the stone steps there were 2 strange stone statues. The statue on the left had a tiger-like body, but on its back was a pair of wings. On the right was a bird-like statue, but on its head were 2 ox-like horns. It should be here. Zhou Wen obviously knew that this was the entrance to the underground tunnel. He had been here many times in-game, but he just never entered. Zhou Wen was somewhat disappointed that he didn't see In Sheng and company. As such, he had no choice but to enter the passageway to find them. I wonder if this item can be used as a replacement for the stone artifact. Zhou Wen looked at the stone egg in the chaos space and felt somewhat depressed. Young Master Wen, I'll go in and take a look. Lu Yun said first. Don't go in now. It's dangerous here. It doesn't matter if we fall in, but if we lose the stone artifact, it won't be worth it, Zhou Wen said. Then what should we do? Lu Yongxian asked. Let's wait for a day or 2. If In Sheng doesn't come out, we'll enter. Zhou Wen needed time to understand the situation in the underground tunnel, or he would be courting death. After all, he was only at the legendary stage and his cultivation level wasn't strong enough. He could not barge in forcefully like in Sheng and Ouyang Lan. If an accident happened, he might not be able to handle any unexpected situations. Lu Yongxian followed Zhou Wen's lead. Since Zhou Wen had said so, he had no objections. Stay guard here and wait for In Sheng and the rest to come out. I'll clean up the rest of the insects in the ruins to prevent them from encountering any trouble after they come out, Zhou Wen said as he prepared to leave. However, he suddenly heard a strange noise from the underground tunnel. Zhou Wen cocked his head to the side to listen. The sound was like a train moving on steel tracks. It sounded rhythmic as though a train was running underground. The sound grew louder, giving the feeling that a train might rush up the pitch-black stone steps at any moment. It's a pity that Truth Listener is evolving. Otherwise, with its abilities, I could tell what was going on inside. Zhou Wen was already beginning to miss Truth Listener's ability. It could resolve many problems. If I remember correctly, this place doesn't have any train networks. There shouldn't be any trains here. Could there be something similar to a train in the myths? Lu Yongxian listened for a while and also heard the sound resembling a train. Zhou Wen shook his head and didn't say a word. In this era, he wouldn't find it unbelievable to have a spaceship fly out from underground. The two of them stared at the stone steps warily. It was pitch black inside, like the mouth to a hell fiend. They could not see anything except the rumbling noises that grew in intensity. It was as if a train was coming out. Zhou Wen and Lu Yongxian looked at each other before they retreated to the side. They stood on both sides of the passageway, at least they wouldn't be hit by a train if it really rushed out. As the sound approached, Zhou Wen was almost convinced that a train was about to rush out. He could even see the flickering lights of a train in the darkness. Is there really a train down there? Lu Yongxian saw the light as well and couldn't help but be surprised. I don't know if it's a train, but it's coming out soon. Be careful. Zhou Wen summoned Dr. Darkness and got him to possess him. Then using Dr. Darkness's light of penetration, he looked into the dark passageway. Article 283 of 1597. Chapter 283 Strange Underground Vehicle. Zhou Wen's eyes illuminated like two miniature floodlights, shooting out two light beams into the dark tunnel. Although the main purpose of this skill was to see through things, viewing things in the darkness wasn't too difficult either. The only limitation was that it could only view things that were close by, not something too far away. The sound of a train in the darkness wasn't far from the exit. With a glance, Zhou Wen's expression immediately changed. There was actually a vehicle in the dark tunnel. It came up from the bottom. It wasn't a train but a strange vehicle made of stone and wood. The design of the vehicle looked ancient. It was a square-shaped horse-drawn carriage. However, the vehicle didn't have any horses or other creatures pulling it. At the front of the carriage was a human-shaped puppet. It stood at a stand at the front of the vehicle, both hands holding onto a crank. Its body moved up and down as it rhythmically rotated the stone crank. With the rotation of the stone crank, the strange vehicle moved up the stone steps. The stone wheels collided with the edge of the stone steps, producing loud thuds. It moved at a rather slow speed. Beside the puppet was a wooden rod with a stone lamp hanging from it. The light that Zhou Wen and Lu Yongxian saw earlier was emitted from the stone lamp. Apart from the puppet, there were no other creatures to be seen. It was as if the puppet was driving the vehicle. The puppet was strange. It looked human, but its face was flat without any facial features, making it look very bizarre. Ari. Zhou Wen only took a few looks before the strange stone carriage reached the mouth of the entrance. It then slowly came to a stop. Zhou Wen and Lu Yongxian sized up the strange vehicle warily, but after the carriage left the stone path, it stopped moving. The puppet on it seemed to have used up all its energy. It stopped there and kept the pose of rotating the crank. Lu Yongxian leapt up, but he didn't approach the vehicle. He only wanted to jump up to see what was inside the vehicle. Lu Ning. After Lu Yongxian reached a certain height, his gaze fell on the back of the vehicle and he screamed. Zhou Wen also flew up to look inside. He saw that there was only a woman lying there. She looked like she had passed out. Apart from that, there was nothing else. It was empty inside the vehicle. Zhou Wen kind of knew the woman Lu Ning who had come with In Sheng. Zhou Wen had a deep impression of her, especially her snow fox. It had powerful ice elemental powers, making Zhou Wen envious. I'll go see if she's dead. Lu Yongxian said as he prepared to jump onto the strange vehicle. Don't go yet. Zhou Wen had a nagging feeling that the vehicle was a little strange. He stopped Lu Yongxian and used demonic astral wheel to suck at the vehicle. The unconscious Lu Ning was immediately sucked out by him and she flew towards Zhou Wen's palm. With Lu Chengzi having served his lesson, Zhou Wen was a lot warier. He didn't touch Lu Ning, instead, he retracted his strength, causing Lu Ning to fall to the ground. He didn't know if she was dead or not, but she did not react at all when she fell to the ground. She just lay there motionless. Zhou Wen first used the light of penetration to look at Lu Ning and discovered that her heart was still beating. Her bodily functions seemed normal. However, the strange thing was that inside her body, there were many extremely slender worms that looked like snakes squirming along her veins. It looked abnormally terrifying. Zhou Wen had an inkling that the reason Lu Ning was unconscious was probably because of these worms. The worms were like strands of hair that squirmed through the blood vessels. Even her heart and organs were filled with them. She's still alive and doesn't seem to be injured. Her heart is also beating. For some reason, she's unconscious, Lu Yongxian said as he checked Lu Ning's body. Her raincoat has been torn, so she can't avoid the blood rain here. It's not convenient to treat her here. Take her back to the tent first. We can ask her what happened inside when she's awake. Seeing that there were no signs of the hair like worms drilling out of her body, Zhou Wen got Lu Yongxian to wrap Lu Ning in a rainproof cloth he had brought along. Lu Yongxian then piggybacked her out of the ruins. When Zhao Xin and company saw Zhou Wen and Lu Yongxian coming out unscathed and bringing someone back, they were quite surprised. Lu Ning. What happened to her? Zhao Xin was shocked when he saw Lu Ning. He knew Lu Ning's might. Her ice elemental primordial energy art was considered top-notch at the epic stage. With the help of many excellent grade companion beasts, not many people could defeat her. Now that Lu Ning had been brought back by Zhou Wen and Lu Yongxian in a coma, it meant that the situation below wasn't looking good. What happened? How's Adjutant and the rest? Zhao Xin asked. I don't know. When we arrived at the entrance of the underground tunnel, we happened to see her come out. We will have to wake her up before we can figure out what happened underground, Zhou Wen said. Let me try. I have an IV companion beast with good healing abilities. As Zhao Xin spoke, he summoned a plant-type companion beast. The green vine wrapped around Lu Ning's body like a snake, its sprouts crawled across Ning's face and reached into her nostrils, mouth, and ears, producing some liquid that resembled water. The liquid had decent healing properties. Even a severely injured person would be able to temporarily awaken. However, despite Zhao Zai making the green vines produce the liquid, he failed to wake Lu Ning. Strange. If she's only injured, the rejuvenation juice would still be effective even if her brain has been injured. Why isn't she reacting at all? Could she have been hypnotized? Zhao Xin asked, puzzled. The others did not have any treatment abilities. They looked at each other, but there was nothing they could come up with. Don't let your companion beast waste its energy. Let it rest for a while. It might be needed later, Zhou Wen said to Zhao Xin. Young Master Wen, do you have a solution? Zhao Xin had changed his mind and called him Young Master Wen like Lu Yongxian. I'll give it a try. It's a last-ditch effort. As Zhou Wen spoke, he flicked his wrist. A strange energy condensed in his hand, forming a metal syringe. Walking to Lu Ning's side, Zhou Wen's eyes stared at Lu Ning like a floodlight. At the same time, he injected the syringe into Lu Ning's arm. When he was in school, he had learned about injections, but it was limited to the basics. Furthermore, it was only theory with no practicals. Zhou Wen was only trying to see if Dr. Darkness's poison could kill the strange worms inside Lu Ning's body. Article 284 of 1597. Chapter 284 Operation. Zhou Wen pushed the syringe in very slowly because he didn't know how much poison was needed to kill the worms. If the dosage was too high, he might poison Lu Ning to death. He couldn't be too reckless. Thankfully, Zhou Wen had experienced the poison himself in-game, so he knew at what concentration it would be fatal. Although it was by his own standards, Lu Ning was at the epic stage, so she likely could endure more than he could. As the poison slowly entered Lu Ning's body, Zhou Wen carefully observed her reaction to see if there was any change in the strange worms due to the poison. If they struggled too hard, he feared that they might damage Lu Ning's body. When that happened, Lu Ning's body would be riddled with holes. Even if the worms were poisoned to death, it would be useless. However, with how serious Lu Ning's situation was, he could only take the risk and give it a try. If he didn't get rid of the worms, she would die sooner or later anyway. Fortunately, the worst situation that worried everyone didn't happen. After the poison was injected into Lu Ning, her body started to twitch violently, but it did not wake her up. Zhao Xin and company looked at Lu Ning worriedly, but Zhou Wen continued to inject more of the poison without any expression. He carefully controlled the amount. It looked like Lu Ning was in great pain, but it was the result of the poison acting up, not because of the strange worms. The poison flowed through her bloodstream. It was excruciating, but very effective. After absorbing the poisoned blood or being corroded by the poison, the worms quickly stopped squirming. Before long, all the worms in Lu Ning's body had been killed, but it didn't ease Zhou Wen's furrowed brows. After the worms died, their corpses remained in Lu Ning's body. This might lead to a blockage, causing problems. If he couldn't remove the hair like worms, death was a certainty for Lu Ning. It was obvious that she had not fully recovered from her persistent coma. But to extract such thin worms from so many tiny blood vessels, and with so many of them in her organs, even the best surgeon in the world wouldn't be able to cut open her blood vessels and organs to extract the worms, right? Zhou Wen thought to himself. As though sensing Zhou Wen's thoughts, Dr. Darkness informed him with a strong thought, as though telling him that he could do it. This left Zhou Wen somewhat astonished. Although every companion beast had their own will, most of them didn't have much of a mind of their own. Up to now, Zhou Wen only had 4 companion beasts that could clearly express their thoughts. Truth Listener, Banana Fairy, Ghost Bride, and Dr. Darkness. Dr. Darkness was born from the Dead Man Tree. It might be extraordinary. Zhou Wen was a little worried. If Dr. Darkness really gained complete sentience in the future, would he turn back into that crazy doctor? He summoned Dr. Darkness and he walked to Lu Ning, his slender fingers holding a scalpel. Zhao Xin and company looked at Dr. Darkness, who was holding the scalpel like a puppet. They knew that it was Zhou Wen's companion beast, but they didn't know why he had summoned one. To have a companion beast operate on humans? This was not something they would have come up with even in their wildest dreams. Indeed, many companion beasts possessed powerful healing abilities that could even revive those on the brink of death. However, they were manifestations of dimensional power, and surgery was a professional technique that was completely different from simple powers. In the next second, Dr. Darkness completely overturned their understanding of companion beasts. The scalpel in Dr. Darkness's hand flashed as it sliced through Lu Ning's blood vessels. Then, with a syringe in hand, he injected the poison into her blood vessels. The entire process was so fluid that it was harrowing. If not for the fact that there were no medical equipment, they might even feel like they were watching the most outstanding doctor in an operation theater. As the poison entered her body, Lu Ning's body convulsed once more. Then, at the spots where the blood vessels had been cut open, blood slowly flowed out. The hair like strange worms flowed out with them. Zhao Xin and the rest were shocked when they saw the strange worms. They could not help but exclaim, "What the heck are those?" After Dr. Darkness was done, he returned to Zhou Wen's side. Zhou Wen was depressed as he thought, "You are just leaving it like that. If she continues bleeding, she will die from excessive blood loss despite your removal of the strange worms." "I want her alive," Zhou Wen said to Dr. Darkness. Dr. Darkness didn't have the ability to answer. All he did was send a thought to Zhou Wen, as though he was saying that he was only responsible for extracting the strange worms. He's still so toxic after becoming a companion beast. It's no wonder he's called Dr. Darkness. Zhou Wen had no choice but to say to Zhao Xin, "Use your ivy to help Lu Ning. Don't let her bleed out." When Zhao Xin heard this, he summoned the ivy again, letting it secrete the rejuvenation juice to nourish Lu Ning's injured body. The rejuvenation juice was rather effective. When all the strange worms had finally flowed out of the wounds, Lu Ning didn't die from excessive blood loss. Instead, she woke Span up. "All right, stop her bleeding." Zhou Wen had used Dr. Darkness's light of penetration to keep an eye on her the entire process. Seeing that all the strange worms had flowed out, he immediately got Zhao Xin and the rest to stop her bleeding. The openings that Dr. Darkness had sliced were tiny. At first, it was the effects of the venom that caused the blood to flow out. When the effects of the poisons reduced, the blood would stop flowing once all the strange worms were purged. Zhou Wen couldn't help but marvel at Dr. Darkness's control over the poison. "Lu Ning, how do you feel? Can you speak?" Zhou Wen asked when he saw Lu Ning open her eyes. Lu Ning's eyes couldn't focus in the beginning. It took her a while to recover. After identifying Zhou Wen and company, her face revealed a look of puzzlement as she struggled to sit up and asked hoarsely, "Why am I here?" "It was young Master Wen who rescued you. You aren't aware, but you were unconscious when you were brought back. Young Master Wen's companion beast showed its prowess and extracted the strange worms from your body," Zhao Xin said as he looked at the strange, hair-like worms that coiled together on the ground. He couldn't help but shiver. The thought of so many worms entering a body made him shudder. Lu Ning's expression changed when she saw the strange worms. She seemed to finally regain complete consciousness and became angry. "Lord Alcohol and those bastards didn't come to help Adjutant and in a search and rescue operation. After we arrived at the underground battlefield, they suddenly revealed their true colors. They attacked us, sending us down a fault." Article 285 of 1597. Chapter 285 Underground Tunnel. Zhou Wen and company were shocked when they heard that. Lu Yongxian hurriedly asked, "Lu Ning, make yourself clear. What happened?" Lu Ning recounted everything that had happened. After following the marks left behind by Ouyang Lan, they found the entrance to the underground tunnel. Then, and Sheng led the rest in. However, not long after they entered, the entrance to the passageway suddenly closed. A large amount of black liquid seeped out from the crevices in the rocks. When they took a closer look, it wasn't a liquid but worms that resembled strands of hair. The number of worms was immeasurable like a tidal wave. The moment the worms touched their bodies, they entered through their pores, quickly knocking them unconscious. If one had too many worms in one's body, it would be fatal. The passageway couldn't be opened and they still needed to rescue Ouyang Lan. And Sheng could only order them to retreat deeper underground. After traveling for some time, they finally escaped the worm tide and found a strange underground temple. Just as Sheng gave the order to explore the temple, Lord Alcohol and the rest suddenly launched a sneak attack on Sheng and Lu Ning. Sheng was caught off guard and was thrown down the fault where the worm tide was everywhere. Although Lu Ning put up a resistance, she was outnumbered. She too was thrown down the fault. Lu Ning only remembered that she had fallen into the worm tide and fainted. She thought she was dead for sure, so she never expected to see Zhou Wen and company when she opened her eyes. Zhou Wen and Lu Yongxian frowned after hearing that. "Don't you know that when you came out, you were in a strange vehicle?" "What vehicle?" Lu Ning frowned. With Lu Ning truly unaware of this, Zhou Wen and Lu Yongxian were puzzled. From what Lu Ning said, it was naturally impossible for Lord Alcohol and the rest to be magnanimous and rescue her. There was something fishy about all of this. Lu Ning, can you draw a map for me of places you walked past and the things you encountered? Zhou Wen asked. Yes, but we were constantly on the run back then. I can remember the general direction, but not the path. I do remember some special landmarks. Lu Ning took a pen and paper and wrote some fragmented information. Have a good rest. We'll think of a way to rescue them. Zhou Wen took the information and prepared to return to game. He planned on following Lu Ning's route first. Lu Ning shook her head and did not say anything. They only had a few people left, so how could they go in to rescue the rest? Furthermore, Sheng had already fallen into the sea of worms. The chances of survival were slim. Zhou Wen didn't believe that a person like Sheng would die so easily. Furthermore, the former principal was probably inside. He had to go in, no matter what. After returning to his tent, Zhou Wen switched on the mysterious phone and entered the Zuolu instance dungeon, arriving at the entrance to the underground tunnel. The game didn't have the strange vehicle. Zhou Wen looked at the information Lu Ning wrote and directly controlled the blood-colored avatar to enter the tunnel. The tunnel was dark and damp, and the stone steps were covered with moss. On both sides of the tunnel were partially dug out artificial stone walls. He could tell that this was supposed to be an underground cave, but it was slightly widened. Not long after he entered the passageway, he heard a loud bang. The passageway's entrance was blocked by a stone door, and the passageway turned dark. Zhou Wen was somewhat unused to the darkness. Without Truth Listener's ability, just his vision alone was insufficient. He couldn't see anything in the darkness. Thankfully, Zhou Wen still had Dr. Darkness to rely on. He activated Light of Penetration, and immediately Zhou Wen's eyes shot out light beams, allowing him to see everything within 10 meters. This glance made Zhou Wen's scalp tingle. He saw that there were many cracks on the stone walls. Countless strands of the strange hair-like worms were gushing out from the cracks, just as Lu Ning had described. They resembled black liquid. Zhou Wen summoned the banana fan and fanned at the surrounding hair-like worms. Wherever the wind passed, the worms were immediately blown away. Slamming into the mountain wall, they turned to crushed ice and died. Killed legendary creature, blood threadworm. Killed legendary creature, blood threadworm. Killed legendary creature, blood threadworm. With one flap of the fan, the system's notification flooded the screen. They are only at the legendary level. Zhou Wen was slightly disappointed. He didn't expect such strange worms to only be at the legendary stage. However, they were still very impressive for drilling into the body of an epic expert and causing her to enter a coma. From the looks of it, level suppression isn't absolute. The power of these blood threadworms is rather special, and with such copious numbers of them, it's no wonder even epic experts have to avoid them. When Zhou Wen saw that the blood threadworms were surging over at him like a tidal wave, he didn't waste his primordial energy any further. He immediately ran deeper into the passageway. Lu Ning slept for more than 10 hours and used some primordial energy crystals. When she woke up again, she looked much better. When Lu Yongxian saw Lu Ning sit up, he suddenly asked her, "Lu Ning, would you dare to enter the underground tunnel again? If Adjutant N is already dead, what's the point of us entering again?" Lu Ning sighed. Now that I think of it, we were desperately running for our lives after we entered the tunnel. I didn't realize it back then, but on second thought, we were led by Lord Alcohol and the rest the entire time. They were familiar with the underground world from the very beginning. They aren't here to save Madame Lan. They have hatched a plot. No matter what motives they have, I don't believe Adjutant N will die so easily. Furthermore, young Master Wen will definitely go in to reinforce Adjutant N. But we don't understand the situation inside too well. If it's possible, I hope that you can follow us into the underground tunnel, Lu Yongxian said. There were certain things that Zhou Wen didn't need to do, but he needed to make plans. Young Master Wen. Do you mean Zhou Wen? I know he has great potential, but he's only at the legendary stage. In such a terrifying place, even we can't protect ourselves. Span, what can I Span do? /I. Lu Yongxian didn't elaborate. He looked at Lu Ning and asked, "Then are you still willing to enter the underground tunnel again? Just think of it as doing it for Adjutant N." Lu Ning gaped and was about to say something when she suddenly heard a clunking sound coming from the ruins. It sounded like a bell, but it did not sound like it was a result of metal colliding. It was more like the sound of stones colliding. Zhou Wen also heard the noise and immediately connected it to the strange vehicle. Furthermore, from the direction of the sound, it seemed to be coming from the entrance to the underground tunnel. Article 286 of 1597. Chapter 286. The strange vehicle sets off. When Zhou Wen came out, Lu Yongxian and company had already walked out of the tent and were looking in the direction of the ruins. "Young Master Wen, should we go take a look?" Lu Yongxian asked Zhou Wen. Clearly, he had also determined that the noises came from the strange vehicle. Zhou Wen nodded. It'd be good to take a look. He was very curious about the strange vehicle too. In the game, he didn't see the vehicle, despite entering the tunnel. Zhou Wen was very curious as to where the strange vehicle had come from. Was it brought in by someone or something that was originally from the underground tunnel? Seeing Lu Yongxian follow Zhou Wen into the ruins, Lu Ning, who hadn't recuperated from her injuries, hesitated for a moment before following them. "How did you resolve the spatial winds?" Lu Ning rode a huge snow fox behind them. She didn't see Zhou Wen and Lu Yongxian use any means to interfere with the spatial wind, so she couldn't help feeling puzzled. When she had entered with the others previously, they had sacrificed quite a number of companion beasts to find a way to interfere with the spatial wind. However, it was only a stopgap measure, the spatial wind still appeared. Young Master Wen has already killed the dimensional creature that uses the spatial winds. There shouldn't be any spatial winds anytime soon, said Lu Yongxian. Lu Ning found it unbelievable. She looked suspiciously at Zhou Wen, finding it hard to believe that this youth could do something so unbelievable. However, the reality forced her to believe it. She didn't encounter the spatial wind again despite having been inside the ruins for some time. Zhou Wen didn't say a word as he walked forward silently. Soon, the three of them arrived in front of the underground tunnel. As expected, the strange vehicle that emitted the sounds was parked in the tunnel. However, it suddenly started moving again when they approached. The wooden puppet standing in front of the vehicle started to move its arms, turning the crank. The strange vehicle began to creak, producing a loud clang with every revolution of the crank. The wheels of the strange vehicle moved slowly, but this time, it didn't move forward, but backward as though it was returning to the ruins. This is the strange vehicle you were talking about. Did I come out lying on it? Lu Ning asked as she looked at the strange vehicle that was slowly retreating. Yes. Lu Yongxian said, you came out on it. You were the only one. What power is driving it? Lu Ning looked at the puppet on the strange vehicle as if she wanted to know if it were alive. Young Master Wen and I had checked before. The vehicle is a dead object. There are no signs of living creatures on the puppet, but we didn't discover any fuel or similar items. We have no idea what principle is behind the driving force. We originally imagined that it had expended its energy source, but from the looks of it, that isn't the case, Lu Yongxian said. Seeing that the strange vehicle was slowly retreating and about to enter the underground tunnel, Zhou Wen looked at Lu Ning and asked, Lu Ning, you were brought out by the vehicle while unconscious. Then, could you have fallen into the strange vehicle? I really don't know. I was struck off the fault by Lord Alcohol and the rest and fell into the tide of blood threadworms. I lost consciousness very quickly. I really don't know what happened next. Lu Ning shook her head. Zhou Wen looked at the strange vehicle that was about to retreat into the tunnel with a frown. In the game, he had already entered deep underground with the information given by Lu Ning. However, Lu Ning's information only had a few landmarks and didn't come with detailed directions or path identifiers. Hence, Zhou Wen had no choice but to find a path himself. However, the underground world was massive. He had spent more than 10 hours in it without finding the temple that Lu Ning mentioned. Zhou Wen didn't have the opinion that Lu Ning was lying to him because the roads inside were complicated, as though they had been changed artificially. He walked for a long time and realized that there were many instances when he would circle back to a spot he had passed previously. This spot wasn't fixed, but despite walking for more than 10 hours in-game, Zhou Wen still failed to walk past it. I remember you mentioning that you fell to a fault layer underground. That was inside the temple, right? Zhou Wen asked Lu Ning. That's right. As soon as we entered the temple, we were ambushed by Lord Alcohol and the others and we were struck down the fault layer, Lu Ning said. If I were to deduce that you fell into this strange vehicle and triggered some mechanism, allowing it to take you out, then if we were to ride this vehicle, would it take us back to the fault layer where you dropped? I really don't know, but it's too dangerous, Lu Ning smiled bitterly. Yes, that's too dangerous. Lu Yongxian said. Although it's very dangerous, this might be the best solution. Lu Ning also said that she was led by Lord Alcohol and the rest. Since they know the path and we don't, we might not be able to find the temple if we just head down. Lu Ning came out on this strange vehicle, and since she was able to come out safely, it implies that the strange vehicle's interior is safe. Our only way of going straight to the temple is by taking the strange vehicle in, Zhou Wen said. Of course, there was another sentence that Zhou Wen didn't say. He had played the game for more than 10 hours and was quite familiar with the underground world. He had a way to deal with the few dimensional creatures inside. What was most troublesome was that he couldn't get out of the maze-like area. The strange vehicle in front of them seemed to be the only hope. But that's just speculation. What if the strange vehicle takes us to a more dangerous place? Lu Yongxian said. We know nothing about the interior, so everything inside is dangerous for us. Zhou Wen saw that half of the vehicle had entered the tunnel and didn't hesitate anymore. He walked over briskly and jumped into the carriage and said to Lu Yongxian and Lu Ning, head back to the camp and wait for me. I'll head on to take a look. Although Zhou Wen could continue waiting and find a way out in the game, he didn't know how long that would take. Perhaps a day or two, maybe a week or so, or even a month or two. He was afraid the former principal couldn't afford to wait for him. Zhou Wen wasn't worried that he would be trapped inside. With his understanding of the underground world, he knew that there were a few relatively safe spots inside. Furthermore, his chaos space also had plenty of daily necessities. He wouldn't be in danger even if he was trapped for a year. Furthermore, he had his phone. After entering the tunnel, he could have the blood-colored avatar follow the path. If any accidents were to happen, he could find a safe place to continue exploring in-game. Article 287 of 1597. Young Master Wen, I'll go with you. Lu Yongxian rushed over and jumped onto the vehicle. Lu Ning was still hesitating, but when she saw that the strange vehicle had already tilted and was about to slide into the underground tunnel, she gritted her teeth and let the snow fox rush her to the strange vehicle. Lu Ning jumped onto the strange vehicle just as it slid down. Cha-chuff. 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 The strange vehicle entered the tunnel, and like a roller coaster, it suddenly sped up and dived deeper underground. Zhou Wen and company hurriedly grabbed the edge of the carriage and saw the scenery behind them rapidly retreating. The strange vehicle charged forward as though it was charging through the criss-crossing caves, but it seemed to have a fixed trajectory. The puppet moved its arms, pushing the crank wildly, its body moving up and down like a sewing machine at full speed. Hold tight. Don't get thrown out. The strange vehicle was too fast, and it didn't slow down when it made turns. Zhou Wen and company nearly flew out due to the shift in their center of gravity. The three of them grabbed onto the edge of the carriage as their bodies floated up. They waited for the bend to pass before slamming into the back of the carriage. Before they could heave a sigh of relief, the next bend was up. Zhou Wen and Lu Yongxian were fine, but Lu Ning had yet to recover. These jolts made her expression change. Fortunately, Lu Ning was not a pampered child. She had traveled across the league as a mercenary hunter, hunting countless dimensional creatures. She had experienced many battles and had encountered situations many times more difficult than she was in now. This wasn't enough to throw her into a panic. After a while, the slope of the cave slowed down and the speed of the strange vehicle slowed down. Zhou Wen and company could finally sit safely in the carriage without being flung around. Lu Yongxian held onto the edge of the carriage and stood up. He looked outside and saw stone walls and tunnels. Looking around, he soon realized that he couldn't even tell which direction they were facing. Young Master Wen, I don't even know where I'm heading to now. Lu Yongxian looked at Zhou Wen helplessly. Lu Ning, look around. Do you remember this place? Zhou Wen asked Lu Ning. He knew the direction and had even memorized the route of the strange vehicle. His focus allowed him to remember everything even under harsh conditions. This was not something the average person could do. However, Zhou Wen didn't say this out loud. Instead, he asked Lu Ning. Lu Ning's face was pale. She stood up with the help of the carriage's sides and looked around. After a while, she said, there are no obvious landmarks here. It's the same as the average cave. I don't know if I've been here before. After some thought, Zhou Wen agreed. There weren't any special characteristics here other than stone walls and forks everywhere. Furthermore, with their poor eyesight, they only had a visibility of less than 20 meters from the illumination of the stone lamp at the front of the vehicle. Suddenly, their eyes lit up. They saw a starry sky appear in the darkness in front of them. In the pitch-black night sky, countless stars shimmered. Zhou Wen and company quickly discovered that it wasn't the night sky but a type of ore on the dark stone walls. It was similar to mica, which gave off fascinating lights. The vehicle traveled in the dark cave, and with the scattered ores looking like stars, it felt like they were flying in the starry sky. It was so beautiful that it made one's soul feel liberated. Not good. When we came here, we passed similar places. Beside those strange light-emitting ores are strange epic creatures. They resemble bats but do not have sonar skills. Their eyes will shoot out light beams. Once contact is made, the body will melt like snow. It's extremely terrifying, Lu Ning said. How many did you meet earlier? Zhou Wen asked as he looked at the top of the stone tunnel. We met 3 in total, but we didn't encounter them together. Otherwise, there might have been casualties, Lu Ning said. Then you might want to be mentally prepared now, Zhou Wen said with a strange expression. Lu Ning and Lu Yongxian couldn't see clearly, but Zhou Wen could see using Dr. Darkness's light of penetration. There were white bat-shaped dimensional creatures hanging from the ceiling. He had no idea how many there were since he couldn't count them all. Just as Lu Ning was about to ask him what he meant, she heard the flapping of her wings. A large swath of white bats swooped down from the ceiling like a thick layer of white cloud. Countless bats had flown over. When Lu Ning saw this, the last of the color in her face drained. Just the number of bats flying over numbered at least 100. And this was limited to what she could see. She had no idea how many more she couldn't see in the darkness. When they first came, they had taken quite a lot of effort to kill a white bat. Now, to have so many bats charging at them, it could be said that they had just been passed the death sentence. Lu Yongxian and Zhou Wen prepared for combat. Lu Yongxian didn't know how powerful the white bats were, but Zhou Wen did. However, he wasn't afraid. He had already seen these white bats in game. The light beams produced by the white bat's eyes were indeed powerful, but Zhou Wen had his ways of dealing with them. Seeing large swaths of bats fly over, Zhou Wen held the banana fan and waved it at the bats. An invisible grand yin wind gushed out, sending the white bats flying. Lu Ning summoned the snow fox and was about to fight to the death when she saw Zhou Wen standing in front of the vehicle, holding an extremely beautiful fan in his hand. He gently fanned the white cloud like bats. The white bats suddenly seemed to be swept away by an invisible force. They flew out and slammed into the stone ceiling, their bodies shattering from the impact. One by one, they smashed loudly into the surrounding stone walls and stone steps around them. Lu Ning looked at Zhou Wen in a daze, unable to believe her eyes. The might of the fan had actually killed nearly 100 white bats. It was truly astounding. She found it unbelievable that it was the work of a legendary student like Zhou Wen. She could accept it if that had been done by a top-notch epic expert. Yet, Zhou Wen, a legendary, was able to produce such might. She found it surreal. Zhou Wen didn't find it strange. The banana fan was a top-notch epic and the white bats also had their weaknesses. They were extremely fast and most epic experts would find it difficult to injure them. Together with their terrifying I-beam skills, they were indeed tough to deal with. However, the white bat's weakness was that its constitution was too low. It was the weakest among epic creatures with about 20 points. It was not much stronger than a legendary. It couldn't withstand the Grand Yin Wind and could not avoid its huge area of effect attack. It could be said that the banana fan was its nemesis. Article 288 of 1597. Zhou Wen watched as large numbers of white bats landed in the tunnel in fragments behind him. There were also some crystals and he couldn't help but feel wistful. The strange vehicle continued to move forward. He didn't know what the consequences would be if he left it, so he didn't attempt to pick up the crystals. He could only watch as the strange vehicle left the spoils untouched. Despite him killing a large group of bats, there were still large numbers that didn't fear death as they charged forward. Looking at the white shadows flying above them, it made one's scalp tingle. Zhou Wen had just used the Grand Yin Wind and his Yuan Qi hadn't recovered when he saw large swaths of white bats rush down. His expression changed slightly as he clenched his bamboo blade and prepared to engage the white bats in melee combat. Lu Yunxian and Lu Ning summoned their companion beasts to prepare for battle. The carriage was too small, so they could only summon companion beasts in their companion form as armor or weapons to aid them in battle. When a large horde of white bats charged down, Zhou Wen was just about to draw his saber when there was a humming sound. All the white bats above retreated. None of them continued charging as they circled the ceiling of the cave. Zhou Wen and company were stunned as they looked ahead. They didn't know when the puppet began holding a strange musical instrument. It was likely made of stone, flat with a few holes on it. It was rather crudely made. However, just as the white bat was about to charge down, the puppet placed the stone musical instrument in front of its face. Its face was a wooden board without any facial features. It was unknown how it blew, but it produced a humming sound. The moment the sound emitted, the white bats immediately retreated again. They hovered above them, but none had the courage to swoop down again. The strange vehicle moved through the bats, but they didn't encounter any more attacks from them. They safely moved forward. Young Master Wen. Don't tell me that the puppet is alive. Lu Yunxian looked at the puppet with his mouth agape. He thought it was a mechanical object. Who knew that there would be such a development? Zhou Wen looked at the puppet as well. The puppet stood in front, no longer moving its arm. However, the strange vehicle continued to move forward at a constant speed. The crank was also spinning autonomously. The puppet stood there, holding the stone musical instrument as it looked forward into the distance. However, without any facial features and eyes, what was it using? It was extremely bizarre. Zhou Wen found it odd, but since it was beneficial to them, he didn't have any intention of attacking the puppet. He was just worried about where the strange carriage would take them. The scenery in front of them suddenly broadened as the white bats that filled the sky scattered. Zhou Wen and company looked past the scattered white bats and saw a blue sky. Unlike the cave from before, this place was actually a huge and boundless space. It was impossible to see the end of this space at a glance. In the distance, one could even see the sea and islands. Above them was a blue sky. However, the blue sky was a little too blue. It was like a sapphire. Zhou Wen looked carefully and realized that it really was a sapphire. A gigantic sapphire formed the sky of the underground space by occupying the entire area above. There were no suns or stars. The sapphire emitted a faint blue light that illuminated the entire underground space. At the same time, everything in the underground space had a blue hue. In the next second, the strange vehicle landed on the blue ocean. Zhou Wen didn't know if it was an ocean, but he just couldn't see the water body's end. All he saw was deep blue seawater. The strange vehicle cruised over the sea surface. Its stone wheels were rolling across the surface as though it was traveling on flat ground. They dragged out two white waves on the surface of the sea in its wake. What's that underneath? Lu Yunxian pointed at the seawater beside him in horror. Zhou Wen and Lu Ning looked at the surface of the sea and saw a huge shadow, as though a behemoth was swimming under the strange vehicle. All they could see was a gigantic shadow, nothing else. Furthermore, the shadow was gradually expanding. Splash. The seawater erupted like a volcanic eruption as it sprayed hundreds of feet into the sky. Huge waves formed as the seawater struck the strange vehicle. However, the strange vehicle appeared imperturbable. This didn't stop the seawater from pouring into the carriage, drenching them. However, Zhou Wen and company weren't in the mood to care about the seawater. The three of them widened their eyes as they stared at the sea by the side of the war wagon. A huge creature that looked like it was carved from obsidian extended half its body from the sea. Its body was perfect and gorgeous. Its black obsidian-like scales shimmered and every inch of its body seemed to be exquisitely carved. Even if one were to observe the titanic body with a magnifying glass, one wouldn't be able to find any crudeness or flaws. The huge body that was like a hill exuded an exquisite and majestic feeling. Dragon. That's a dragon. A dragon carved from obsidian, Lu Yongxian stammered as he pointed at the creature that had stretched half its body out of the sea. Zhou Wen didn't look too good either. The development seemed to exceed his expectations. Regardless of whether the terrifying creature in the sea was a dragon or not, he could tell from its aura that it was a terrifying existence. It might even be stronger than the white dragon in Dragon's Well. Boom. Boom. A series of crashing waves sounded as the seawater around the strange vehicle churned. Copious amounts of seawater surged over, knocking Zhou Wen and company off their feet. However, their gazes were never on the strange vehicle's interior but outside. Black dragon heads emerged one after another. 1, 2, 3. When Zhou Wen saw the 9th black dragon extend its head out of the sea, he felt numb. Roar. The 9 creatures carved from obsidian roared at the strange vehicle, sending sonar waves at them. Even the seawater turned into tumultuous waves as a result of the sonar waves. They surged at the puny strange vehicle from every direction. We're doomed. Lu Yongxian's expression changed drastically. Such terrifying creatures and such terrifying sound waves implied that they had no way of escaping the calamity. Zhou Wen held the banana fan tightly as he prepared for death. Even though he knew he wasn't a match for these entities, he couldn't just sit back and do nothing. Hum. The strange sound from the stone musical instrument echoed in front of the carriage. The sound wave dispersed the churning sonar waves and tsunamis at the same time, preventing them from getting close to the strange vehicle. The 9 black dragons stared at the strange vehicle covetously, but none of them lunged forward. They only watched as the strange vehicle slowly drove towards the other side of the sea. Zhou Wen and company's hearts raced. After the strange vehicle left the 9 black dragons, Zhou Wen looked back and saw the 9 obsidian-like dragons roaring at the sky as though they were venting their anger. And beneath the sea, Zhou Wen discovered that the lower half of their bodies were connected, like a black mountain that had sunken into the sea. Only then did he realize that it wasn't 9 dragons but a monster with 9 heads. Article 289 of 1597. Chapter 289 Returning to the Bat Cave. The strange vehicle raced across the sea while the puppet remained in front, staring into the distance, motionless like a statue. Is this how I came back? Lu Ning asked. Her face looked puzzled. She couldn't imagine what she had experienced while she was unconscious. Zhou Wen leaned against the back of the strange vehicle, playing games on his phone. He wanted to see if he could control the blood-colored avatar to take the same path. Although he knew that it was useless even if the blood-colored avatar walked over, successfully passing the cave of white bats, it was impossible for him to cross the underground sea with the 9-headed dragon guarding it. However, there wasn't much to do in the strange vehicle. Lu Ning was resting while Lu Yongxian was observing the situation ahead. Since he had nothing else to do, Zhou Wen began grinding the instant's dungeon. Zhou Wen sat at the back, and there was only the sea behind him. In front, Lu Yongxian and Lu Ning couldn't see what he was playing. Zhou Wen controlled the blood-colored avatar to move forward at full speed. Soon, large groups of blood threadworms surrounded him. Zhou Wen didn't have the patience to deal with them. He ignored them and ran at full speed. When his primordial energy filled up, he killed all of them, letting them rain crystals. However, he no longer had any use for legendary crystals. As for the blood threadworm eggs that dropped, Zhou Wen would pick them up and incubate them. The blood threadworms were not strong, but if there were a lot of them, things were different. Even epic stage experts had to avoid them. Zhou Wen had hatched quite a number of blood threadworms. He planned on trying to see if they were of any use. If they were useful, he would keep them and not feed them to his pets. Where can I find a speed-type mount? I run with my legs all the time and it expends my primordial energy, but I can't do anything about it. Zhou Wen used his primordial energy to increase his speed and ran for a while before having to recover his primordial energy. This was quite tiring, so he thought of how he needed a mount. Zhou Wen naturally had something extraordinary about him, being called a genius among geniuses by the former principal. His divergent thinking abilities and memory far exceeded that of ordinary people. He remembered the complicated routes that the strange vehicle took despite its fast speed and quickly arrived at the cave of white bats. Looking at the ores that looked like stars in the cave, Zhou Wen suddenly wondered if he could dig out these ores in-game. Thinking about it, he gave it a try. It was not difficult to dig the ores. The blood-colored avatar shattered the rocks beside the ore, digging out a translucent milky white crystal. Obtained primordial crystal. Weight 21 grams, primordial crystal purity 0.12. This crystal is actually something that the game acknowledges. But what's the use of primordial crystals? It can't be used to make weapons that can kill dimensional creatures like primordial gold, right? Zhou Wen was astonished. Unfortunately, there was no storage space in-game. Even if he knew that the primordial crystals were useful, he couldn't take them away. I wonder if there are any storage-type companion beasts. If they exist, I have to get one. Otherwise, it's such a pity to waste so much good stuff. Zhou Wen had heard of such a companion beast, but he had never seen it. He also had no idea where they dropped. Zhou Wen didn't wait for the white bats to attack after entering the bat cave. He attracted the attention of the nearby white bats over. There wasn't any strange vehicle in the game, so if he were to be surrounded by the bats, he would definitely die. Therefore, Zhou Wen planned on killing them along the way and let them drop their items. If he was lucky, he might even have a white bat drop as a mount. They flew at extremely fast speeds and were rare flying pets. Zhou Wen was very interested in getting one. The only worry was he couldn't hatch an epic companion egg. Zhou Wen lured a horde of white bats and with the fan, he sent them flying. Their bodies turned into ice sculptures in midair, shattering upon collision with the stone walls. Seeing dozens of white bats being destroyed by a single attack and having plenty of crystals drop excited Zhou Wen greatly. It would be great if all epic creatures can be killed as easily as these white bats, Zhou Wen thought greedily. It was a pity that it was not easy to find such weak epic creatures. Furthermore, there were few places with epic creatures appearing in huge hordes. In some smaller dimensional zones, epic creatures usually appeared alone. Even in a super dungeon, like Zuolu, it was rare to encounter one. After scanning the battlefield, he discovered that the crystals produced by the white bat were mostly speed crystals. Epic crystals were very useful, but Zhou Wen's absorbing was useless, nor could he take them away. He felt as if he had lost a winning lottery ticket as he looked at the floor of crystals. A storage companion beast. I must get a storage companion beast, Zhou Wen screamed inwardly. Zhou Wen lured and killed countless white bats along the way. Although he didn't keep a careful count, he estimated he killed at least 400 to 500 of them. The crystals that dropped were all basic stat crystals. Ding. Upon hearing a rather unique chime, Zhou Wen looked at the pile of white bat corpses and his eyes lit up. Among a few crystals, there was a crystal that glowed blue. The words on it were different from the rest. Poison, 13. Overjoyed, Zhou Wen he hurriedly got the blood-colored avatar to pick up the poison crystal. After absorbing it, his poison stat reached 13 points. A poison stat allowed Zhou Wen to have a decent poison resistance. Furthermore, some special epic primordial energy skills had special requirements towards his stats. Zhou Wen thought that if he could obtain a primordial energy skill that came with the poison element in the future, the poison stat would definitely be useful. Seeing that the white bats dropped poison crystals, Zhou Wen felt energized and continued charging forward. He kept luring and culling large numbers of them. When he was less than halfway through the bat cave, Zhou Wen lured a large group of white bats and fanned them, sending them all to their deaths. However, one of the bats flickered and vanished as though it had teleported. When it appeared again, it had passed the Grand Yin Wind and appeared in front of the blood-colored avatar. Only then did Zhou Wen realize that the white bat was different from the others. It was bigger and its color was different from the whiteness of the normal white bats. It looked as though it was carved from milk white jade and its eyes were like two shining diamonds. In the next second, a beam shot out from the white jade-like bat's eyes and headed straight for the blood-colored avatar. Zhou Wen hurriedly used ghost steps to dodge its attack and began engaging in combat with Biat/I/B. Article 290 of 1597. The white bat's speed was already surprisingly fast, but the jade white bat was ludicrously fast. It wasn't inferior to the Ghost King. Furthermore, Zhou Wen realized that it wasn't just purely a difference in speed because it could now use the skill to pass through Great Yin Wind without suffering any damage. Could this jade white bat really be capable of spatial teleportation? Or is it the legendary instantaneous transmission? Zhou Wen was astonished as he constantly controlled the blood-colored avatar to circle around the jade white bat. Dr. Darkness and Ghost Bride helped by the side, but the jade white bat was too fast. They were unable to injure it. Suddenly, Zhou Wen's heart stirred. He saw the jade white bat phase into existence on a spot before him. After deducing its location, he suddenly raised his palm and chopped down the demonic astral wheel. The sanguine wheel of light spun furiously as it slashed at the jade white bat. The jade white bat flapped its wings and easily dodged the demonic astral wheel. However, when it continued charging at Zhou Wen, it grunted. The demonic astral wheel boomeranged back and landed on the jade white bat's back at an even faster speed. CV. Zhou Wen's primordial energy wasn't enough to severely injure an epic creature, but the jade white bat was the type of epic creature with high speed but weak constitution. With the demonic astral wheel hitting its back, the spinning blade beams immediately left a long gash on its back as blood splattered. This attack caught the jade white bat by surprise. Its body deviated from its trajectory and lost control for a moment. Dr. Darkness stabbed out with the scalpel in his hand. The scalpel in the Life Soul's hand almost overlapped with his scalpel, stabbing into the bat's chest, staggering it in midair. Zhou Wen didn't hesitate and made Banana Fairy take her true form. She puffed up her cheeks, turning her face chubby. Then, she blew at the jade white bat. The jade white bat was frozen in place by the scalpel and couldn't move. It was sent flying by the Great Yin Wind. Its body rapidly turned into an ice sculpture in the air before smashing into the wall and shattering to pieces. Ding! Zhou Wen heard another special chime of something dropping. He hurriedly looked over and saw a milky white egg drop on the ground. Zhou Wen was instantly overjoyed. I'm really lucky today. I'm getting whatever I've been wishing for. However, on second thought, Zhou Wen felt a little nervous. He didn't know if he could hatch a complete epic companion egg. Regardless, Zhou Wen first got the blood-colored avatar to pick up the companion egg and checked its attributes. White Shadow of Poison Epic. Life Providence, Bone Corroding. Life Soul, Shadow of Darkness. Strength 27. Speed 40. Constitution 24. Primordial energy 32. Primordial energy skill Flash Poison Ray Claw of Poison. Companion form Arm Wings. After seeing the white shadow of Poison's attributes, Zhou Wen finally understood why this fellow was able to pass through the Grand Yin Wind. It didn't teleport, but its shadow of darkness life soul could temporarily let it take on a shadow form. No matter how strong the wind was, it was impossible for it to blow away the shadow. The white shadow of Poison in an incorporeal shadow form was nearly invulnerable. However, white shadow of Poison could only enter a shadow state for a short period of time. Coupled with the speed-boosting flash skill, it appeared as if it had completed teleportation. Zhou Wen gained a rough idea of its 3 skills, but white shadow of Poison's companion form left him somewhat puzzled. Flying-type companion beasts were mostly winged companion beasts, and most of them had wings as their companion form. However, this was the first time Zhou Wen had heard of arm wings. Looking at the white shadow of Poison's information, especially the information on the companion form, he saw a pair of white bat wings appear on the phone screen. However, unlike ordinary wings, the upper part of the wings was not an ordinary skeleton frame, but a bat's claws. The arm wings could be considered wings, and could also be considered a pair of arms. It was indeed very strange. Zhou Wen carefully looked at the white shadow of Poison's wings and discovered that they were indeed very ordinary, but extremely useful. They could be used as wings, allowing it to fly faster, and it could also be used as a pair of arms that were rather agile. When in combat, they could launch an attack that caught the enemy by surprise. Good stuff. I just don't know if it can be fully hatched. Zhou Wen couldn't bear to use such a high-leveled companion egg as food. He gritted his teeth and prepared to hatch it. However, Zhou Wen didn't incubate it blindly. He first held onto the companion egg to grind a few white bats and picked up a few primordial energy crystals. Placing them beside the blood-colored avatar, he made the blood-colored avatar sit on some and held 2 primordial energy crystals in hand. Only then did he choose to hatch the egg. In an instant, Zhou Wen felt his primordial energy drain out of his body. He couldn't even replenish his primordial energy with Dao body. At this moment, the 2 primordial energy crystals in the blood-colored avatar's hands showed their effects. They kept injecting the blood-colored avatar with primordial energy. Likewise with the primordial energy crystals under him. However, they were not absorbed as quickly as the primordial energy crystals in his hand. Although he had the dual replenishment stemming from his Dao body and primordial energy crystals, hatching a companion egg required too much primordial energy in a short period of time. The expenditure couldn't keep up with the supply provided, making Zhou Wen feel physically drained. After enduring for more than 20 seconds, just as Zhou Wen thought the blood-colored avatar was about to explode, the companion egg finally turned into a white beam and fused into the blood-colored avatar. At the same time, a white bat tattoo appeared on Zhou Wen's back. Clearly, the incubation had been successful. I succeeded. Zhou Wen was overjoyed as he hurriedly looked at the white shadow of Poison's attributes. They were still the same. It remained at the epic stage and didn't drop in level. Its attributes were exactly the same as before. Zhou Wen anxiously summoned the white shadow of Poison before riding on its back and rode it deeper into the bat cave. Indeed, he was traveling much faster this way. With the help of the white shadow of Poison, Zhou Wen's grinding speed increased. Along the way, he had another poison crystal and a primordial energy skill crystal drop. The poison crystal only had 9 points, so it was useless for Zhou Wen with his 13 poison stat. However, Zhou Wen loved the flash primordial energy skill crystal. He absorbed it immediately, learning flash at the rank 6. It was a wing-required flying skill that greatly augmented his flight speed. Zhou Wen had the white shadow of Poison, so he used it with great skill and verve. If he wasn't in a rush to scout ahead, Zhou Wen would have spent a few months here grinding and having more good stuff drop. After passing the bat cave, Zhou Wen finally saw the endless underground sea. He couldn't help but look deep into the sea, searching for signs of the 9-headed dragon. Article 291 of 1597.